Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sobriety Engine speaker meeting. Tonight is December 12th, 2020. Our speaker tonight is Frank himself.
You're frozen. You're frozen. You're frozen.
My internet connections. Yeah, my internet connection's unstable. Frank is someone that I have that I see often in the morning meetings here on Sobriety Engine, and he is a walking textbook of what it means to be working recovery. As always, I like to ask the people who, for two words that describe their journey and sobriety. And Frank said he was a grateful survivor. And I found this quote: "A new day. Be open enough to see opportunities. Be wise enough to be grateful. Be courageous enough to be happy." For me, that's all about what being a survivor is counting my blessings and moving forward. So yeah, with all of that being said, let's hear what Frank has to say about being a grateful survivor.
Hi, everybody. My name is Frank, and I'm an alcoholic. And thank you, Stephanie and Travis, for asking me to tell my story tonight. And it's been a while since I told my story. But I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, 67 years ago in 1953. And my family lived outside of Scranton in a small town where I lived until sixth grade. Then we moved to a more suburban area because there was a better high school. And when I was living in that small town in that suburban area, I used to hang out with the wild crowd, the troublemakers, and we used to smoke cigarettes after school and do all kinds of crazy things. And when I moved to that suburban area, um, I had friends that went away to school and they brought home drugs. And I was introduced to hashish. And my friend and I used to smoke hash in his basement. And I guess that was the first time. And then it turned into marijuana. And I grew up in the 60s. So people were using drugs and into rock music and protesting the Vietnam War and fighting the civil rights battles and that kind of stuff. So protest was part of my generation, and rock music was part of my generation, and being part of the counterculture, being against the main dominant culture and all that that involved. And there was a saying back then, don't trust anybody over 30. And so that was all part of it. And I went away to college, and in that college, I hung out with the people that drank and used drugs. And I started to do LSD and mescaline on the weekends. And starting in the winter of that school year, I got depressed and anxious. And by the spring, I was really depressed and had suicidal thoughts and decided to drop out of college. So I worked for a year. And then after that, I went to another college out west where I continued to party and smoke marijuana and do LSD and mescaline. And that went on for 2 years. And when I was doing that, I started to get depressed again and had some mild hallucinations. And after the second year out there, my third year of college, I went home for the summer. And all I remember that summer was riding on the back of a friend's motorcycle, going to bars, doing drugs. And then I sort of went into this dark spot and came back to reality in a psychiatric hospital on Long Island. And I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I was in that hospital for 4 months. And I kept telling them I want to go home. So finally they let me go home. And I was depressed and suicidal. And I was working at a minimum wage job. And I tried to commit suicide and I failed. So I went to a psych ward in a local hospital and got out and went home. And after that, I finished up my last 2 years of college and I got my degree in English, which really didn't qualify me to do anything. And I was living at home and partying. And my parents got me a job. And the night before that job, I was out partying and I missed going to work. My parents got upset and threw me out of the house. I wound up on the street and I wound up in Scranton living with friends. And at that time, a doctor had told me I didn't need my medication. And I started to get sick, and that's when my parents threw me out of the house. They didn't know it. They didn't know that I was sick because they couldn't tell. And but anyway, they threw me out, and I was hallucinating. I was hearing voices. I thought I was talking to rock stars and all other sorts of crazy hallucinations. And I wound up on the street in New York, and I was stuck in New York. So to get out of New York, I bought a hot car, a stolen car, and drove it back to Scranton. And instead of getting rid of the car, I was out of it. I was hallucinating. I was psychotic. I took the car and drove to State College, Pennsylvania with friends. Then we drove back to New York and got caught speeding on a highway outside of New York. And I wound up in jail in Warren County, New Jersey for 4 months. And when I was in jail, I was hallucinating. I was psychotic. I kept getting beaten up in jail. They had to put me in solitary for my protection. And then I got out of jail and I went into a psychiatric hospital. When I was in jail, a friend of my mother's came to visit me, and she was an alcoholic, and she knew I was an alcoholic. And I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I didn't believe I was an alcoholic, but she helped me get out of jail and into a psychiatric hospital in Philadelphia, where I stayed for 4 months and got better, but I got depressed. Years later, I found out that I have post-psychotic depression. After a psychotic episode, I get depressed and really badly depressed. So after I got out of that hospital, I was in a transitional living program where they teach you to live in an apartment, take care of yourself, buy food. And I was in a daycare program for adults with mental illness for about 2 years. And then I graduated and I was living in Scranton in a room. I was living on about $300 a month SSI, but I always had money to go to the bar. And I went to a paralegal school for about 2 years. Then I went to another paralegal school in Philadelphia. Then I got a job in Wilkes-Barre, which is a city near Scranton, where I was for 4 years. And then I got a job in Philadelphia. And all during all of those years, I was drinking every day and smoking pot. I stopped the LSD and mescaline, and I was smoking pot and drinking alcohol, going to bars, drinking at home every night after work, and that just continued, and that partying continued up until 1996, when I had a friend from Brazil who told me he thought I had a drinking problem, and I was in denial and didn't really think much of it. And then I had another doctor, again, who told me I didn't need medication, and I got psychotic, and I stopped going to work, and I called that doctor and told him I wanted to go to detox and rehab because my friend had planted the seed. So he signed me into a detox and a rehab in a psychiatric hospital. And I was psychotic. And on the way to the hospital, I had a moment of insight where I realized the problem was I wasn't taking medication. And when I got to the hospital, I told them that the doctor told me to stop the medication and that I was psychotic. And they gave me a psychiatrist who took care of me while I was in detox and rehab. They let me participate in the detox and rehab while I was psychotic and put me back on medication. I got better. And when I was in the detox and rehab, I knew I really needed to be there. And I knew I was an alcoholic and that I was mentally ill, because part of the problem was that I wasn't really sure if I was mentally ill because I did so well on medication. And I knew I was an alcoholic after all that. I just accepted it. I was there, and I worked really hard in the program at the rehab. And when I got out, my counselor at the rehab told me to talk to my employer about taking a week off to go around the AA meetings in Philadelphia. So I did that. And I didn't really connect with any of the meetings. And I didn't go to AA for 2 years. I stayed sober for 2 years. And then I lost a job. I was an angry, dry drunk. And I got fired from my job. And my cousin said, why don't you go to AA? So I went to an AA meeting. I found an LGBT meeting, and I took to that meeting, and that's where I learned about sobriety and AA and how to get sober and stay sober. And when I went, I was very shy. I shared very briefly, and then my shares would get longer. And I realized that sharing was a way for me to deal with my problems. I talked about being depressed. I talked about how much I hated my job. I talked about all these things about my life in the meetings, and people would listen, and I would listen to them and their problems. And all that dialogue and sharing really helped me a lot to overcome a lot of my shyness. And I chaired meetings for a while. I told my story several times, and I wound up losing a job. I got another job. I wound up losing that job. I got another job. And then I wound up losing that job. And I had a therapist who told me I should not go back to work. I should apply for disability, which I did. And I had stayed sober all those years. And I applied for disability. And it took 5 years, and I went before a judge and I got it. And I got the money just in time. I was getting close to being flat broke. And my parents helped me out at the end, and I paid them back. And my landlord let me go for a month, and I paid him back when I got the disability money. And then in 2017, I went to a urologist at a large prostate, an enlarged prostate, and the urologist was going to do surgery, and he sent me to a cardiologist for cardiac clearance for the surgery. And the cardiologist found something on the EKG and sent me to the hospital for catheterization and a CT scan. And she called me up and said she tried to call my cousin to come into our appointment the next day. And I said, how come you're calling her the day before the appointment? And she said, we found something on your CT scan. So I was like, I figured it was cancer, and I was right. When I got to the appointment, she told me I had cancer. And her husband was a thoracic surgeon who specialized in cancer at the University of Pennsylvania, and she sent me to him, and he did the surgery. And then there were lymph nodes left that were cancerous, so I had chemo and radiation, and that didn't work. And then I had immunotherapy, and that worked, and I got pneumonitis from the immunotherapy, and now I have COPD. I'm living with COPD, but I can manage it. And during all this times, I kept going to AA meetings. I kept in touch with friends. I kept in touch with my sponsors and did all that stuff because I knew it helped me. And I liked the meetings. I liked being with other alcoholics. And I liked the fellowship and all of that. And then I started doing mental health advocacy for a while. I started doing environmental advocacy for a while. And right now I'm doing lung cancer advocacy and lobbying. I'm going to be doing that again in March. So recovery is possible. I made it. You can make it. If you stay sober, your life will be better because you don't have to deal with all that craziness of drugs and alcohol and all the problems it brings. And my mental health is better. It took me a long time to get over my depression, but now I only get a little bit in the morning. And my life isn't great. You know, I'm living on Social Security, and my mother died September 21st, and I had to deal with that. And before she died, she was in and out of the hospital and assisted living in nursing homes. So I was there for her during all that and helping her with things she needed taken care of. And that's just part of life. And I'm doing okay now. I'm happy. And I'm glad to be here to tell my story with everybody here. I'm grateful for all of you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank, for coming here tonight to be able to share your story with us. You know, I'm probably gonna say this every single meeting, but it never surprises me what comes out of people's mouths when they share it. And like, hey, they're telling my story. You know, like you started right off as I got into the wrong crowds, and then drugs came along, and I'm like, man, when I was a kid, I was not doing very much in school too. I was always in trouble and shenanigans, and then I see like the parallels of your life and how it just got worse. You know, it for me, when my mental health and stuff went unchecked, it just gave my disease more medicine. more fuel to go rampant. And obviously the context of most of our stories is different. But I think the biggest thing that you touch on, sharing your problems with others so that they can, hear. First of all, it gets out of our head so that it's not tormenting us anymore, but also so that we can all draw correlations with each other, so that we know that we aren't alone, and you never know what another person is going through, so that we can relate to that. So a great share, Frank, really. And I'm truly grateful that you're able to make it through all of the things that you've had to go through, the cancers, the psych wards, dealing with, your mental health disorders, and, like some homelessness and everything. You're a walking testament of what recovery is. And I'm so grateful that you're in this program with all of us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's open up the meeting for other people to chime in here. Craig?
My name's Craig. I'm an alcoholic from Chula Vista, California. And Frank, my brother, it takes so much courage to get up there and tell all the story, the deep, dark story, the things that went on, and how you've made it this far. And I've known you since COVID first started, and it was so good to see you this evening. And Again, I find myself, like Travis just said, I find myself listening real close. And, there's so many similarities, but yet so many differences. And I'm able to pick out the similarities, and that's what keeps me coming back. And I want to thank you for your story. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything that they'd like to share with us tonight? Stephanie?
Yeah, Frank, that was awesome. Sorry I popped in late, but yeah, it was really good to see like more about you. I feel like I only kind of see you in the peer support groups, and you're always giving that support, and you're always there for other people. So it was good to hear your story and be able to get to know you better. And also, you deserve that peer support back. So that's what we're here for. I'm glad you got the help you need. I'm glad you're recovering, and I'm glad you're dealing with all your battles and getting, doing the damn thing. So congrats on that. And I hope you just continue to strive, because you're strong. That's all I really have to say. But thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Stephanie. Mr. Leo.
Hey, everybody. Frank, one of the things I admire about you, always have admired about you, is here's the truth. No agenda. You don't make it flowery. You're not over the top. It just, this is the truth. Nice, even keel. You're a pleasure to listen to, because everybody, I trust the hell out of you, because it's the truth, man. Whether or not I want to hear it, whether or not I want to deal with anything. I don't have your similarities, but I've got my journey, and my truth, staying to it, keeps me okay. And you just bring it. This is what's going on. This is how I got out of it. I need the other folks. You all can do it too. We're all in this together. I love that. I love that about you. Thank you for your share, bud.
Thank you, Leo. It's the community support is so important, and I think we discover that when we all share. I really like when Frank was talking about when he first got into rehab, and he said that at first he was shy and he wasn't sharing very much. And I remember like my first meeting and how I wanted to share so much. And then like the first time I shared, I was so nervous. My voice was so shaky. I was sweating. I was so like, just nervous as hell. And then maybe a week went by and I started sharing a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, like a month or two went by and, I was hosting meetings in my rehab, but I too found that by getting things out of my head, it helped. I was able to grow. And Frank drives that home every time I see him. So thank you, Frank. Anybody else have anything that they would like to share with us tonight?
I'll share. Hi, this is
Jessica?
Jess. Jess Addict. Thank you so much for your share. I actually lived in, when you talk about Pennsylvania, I lived there at one point, and I worked in Bluebell, like outside, more outside Philly. And then I lived in Jersey, so I was a Jersey girl for a while. I was actually thinking about that the other day because I actually had the Jersey plates and everything. Anyway, so that was just like on a positive end. It was nice to kind of get a chuckle because it's been sort of a little tough day for me personally. So anyway, I was like, oh my God, I haven't thought about Pennsylvania in so long. But I appreciate you sharing. It kind of hits home a little bit because I'm dealing with my father right now. Like, I'm leaving. I got to go to Vermont tomorrow. He got diagnosed with psychosis, I guess. He fell in September and then he just hasn't, it's gotten worse. And he's just not, he's having I get nonstop episodes and hallucinating and things like that. So your share was a little bit exactly good and bad. I mean, it's so great to see that you've come through on that and that it's a possibility, but I guess trying to be a realist about things, especially him being 82. So, but yeah, I don't know a lot about that side of things. And so God, to hear how far you've come, just to hear him in the background with my mom on the phone, when things, it's just so heartbreaking to know someone goes through that. And I am not there live yet. So I'm a little, obviously prepping myself to be able to put on the big girl pants and handle things. But part of me just wants my dad back at Christmas time. So thank you. I don't mean to take away from your story, but you just brought a lot of stuff out for me that I'm going through right now. So I appreciate everybody here because I can kind of feel it gives me strength to come on the meeting. I almost didn't just because I didn't know, but I'm glad I did. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Jess. And I don't think that anyone has the power to steal a meeting from anybody. While it is Frank's share, we do all come here as a community to relate with him and give each other love. So I know for myself, pray that things go well for you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing that, Jessica. It's really tough, and you're very brave to go help your family. I really admire that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a little hard to face because when they go, I don't really have a lot of other family that are people that are healthy people. My brother, unfortunately, is kind of a mess himself with things. So yeah, so I'm just trying to be strong, but you got to face it. So that's just part of my stepping stone. Like you said, you got to deal with it and find ways. And that means family doesn't always have to be, actually I'm adopted, but the blood thing, but in my case, that's not even, but so thank you.
Thank you.
Did anybody else like to share with us tonight? Anything that was, resonates with them, or some words of encouragement for us tonight?
Hey, Dave, alcoholic addict. Just like to start off, Frank, by thanking you for, like was said, for having the courage to come on and share your story. I have a lot of respect for you. You're very inspiring. Can also like can relate to a lot of what you had said. Uh, Especially in my younger days, experimenting with a lot of experimental drugs for sure that I tried, and having some mental illness, and it's just. But I'm definitely suffer with a lot of depression for sure, and anxiety. But it's getting better, and I really think I'm privileged to found this group, which gives me a lot of motivation in life and inspiration. And I'm really just grateful for it. Things are getting better every day, and thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Dave.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. And one of the things too is Dave just touched upon it, the depression that I failed to deal with in my life and seemed to choose to self-medicate. And it's almost like there was a certain point in Frank's life where his doctor took him off of his medications, and then the old habit was to self-medicate again until he came to a point where he was like, shit, maybe I should get back on my medication and stop self-medicating myself. I know for me, self-medicating myself was not the right thing to do. Many times it made my depression worse, and I didn't understand it. And I think as we get further as a culture into the disease of addiction and understanding that a lot of these underlying symptoms of the mental health are going to come to the surface, just for a multitude of reasons. We are some strong people, though, like we have each other. This is why we have our community support systems, so that we can come here and talk about this stuff, and draw precisely these parallels to relate with each other to help each other stay strong. Those who stay in a support network have a better chance of surviving whatever it is that we're dealing with. So thanks for bringing that up and sharing that vulnerability with us, Dave and Frank. Who else would like to share?
Hi, everybody. My name is Gustavo, and I like to claim myself as an alcoholic. I do that because I know that I'm afflicted by the disease of alcoholism. One of the things that I really appreciate about this Zoom meeting with Sobriety Engine is that we get to touch not just on sobriety from AA and the Big Book and CA, but also from outside sources, right? And I was afflicted with depression for many, many years, right? And I faced depression since young adulthood, right? All the way to like my adulthood. And I remember being a brown and in a white school, and I just couldn't fit in, right? I was bused from all the way from the other side of the ghetto right to this area, and I just couldn't fit in. I couldn't relate, right? Because everybody's doing well, everybody seems to be eating well, right? They don't have to worry about gangs running up on them. Guns were being pointed at me, I was being shot at, I was being jumped, I was being chased, right? All this hecticness of living in the ghetto and then coming to this area, I just couldn't relate with them, and they really didn't know what I was going through, right? As soon as I left school, I had to go face reality, right? Whether it was that or a million other things, whatever what it was, I was going through a lot of depression, right? And I started doing a lot of personal development groups as I got older. And one of the groups that I did was one that would develop and helped me develop and to view myself as what I have created as the story of myself, right? So to share real quick, the view that I had about myself was that I was the outsider, right? You guys remember the outsider, the book, and then they had a movie about the outsiders. You know, I was one of them characters, right? That's not really how I felt, right? They had the jocks and they had the greasers, right? I was one of the greasers, and I really and I created that story, and I didn't know I had done that, but until I had done that special training to reflect on who I thought I was, I realized that every time I felt in a depression, I would fall into a story of who I thought I was, right? And this was this character that pertained and played itself that wanted to be real in my life. And and it would always pop and creep itself out, right? When I would feel like I would lose my composure, my hair would drop low, and everything was just starting to seem blue, right? And then I would catch myself that that the character that had been built inside this brain of mine, this mind of mine, wanted to become real again, right? Like it did throughout my youth, my young adulthood. And I catch it, and you know what? And I catch that, and I'm able to break out of those depressions, you know. And what hurts me a lot is that I see a lot of people stuck on these stories of who they think they are, you know, and people are dying because of these stories, or what their mind created about themselves, right? About they're not good enough, they're this or they're that, right? And people are dying every day because of these stories that are running crazy circles inside our heads, right? And when I hear people talking about the negativities and you know, always about the negative things, you know, one of the things that I learned from one of my sponsors was that it's my perception that creates my reality. So if my perception is always negative, that's my reality. My reality is always negative, you know. And I'm not here to co-sign anybody's bullshit, and I don't want anybody to co-sign my bullshit. But that's reality. We create our own reality. You know, our perception of what we see becomes our reality. So we see negativity, and we see blueness, and we see darkness. That's what a reality is. But you know, you could step out on the same day and feel down, depressed, and down on earth. And the next day you could feel like, man, this is the best day I ever had in my whole damn life. The difference is there is no difference. The sun is still above your head. The sky is still above your head. The you know the clouds are still there, right? It's the same damn thing. The planet just rotated, right? But it was your perception of what you got to see that specific day, right? So we could co-sign each other's bullshit for years to come, or we could just come to reality and say, you know what, it's a perception that we choose of how well we see life is. So we get in the rooms of recovery, we get to choose, right? We get to choose where we want to go, right? Do we want to still keep killing ourselves with the bottle and the drugs, or do we move forward and create a new life, right? Do you still want to be that same dick that you were when you were drinking, or you stop drinking and become a new person, right? You still carry the old perception, right? And sometimes, man, it's just, you know, we wanna co-sign people's nonsense so much and just be liked and be patted on the back that everything's gonna be all right. But the reality is that you choose your own perception. So if life looks shitty and looks horrible, my man, you probably want to look at the mirror and look at what makes you think that way and change it around, man, because your perception is what makes your reality, you know. And I recognize that because I start falling into depressions, right? Because that character still lives in my head. I still start falling into these holes. I have to remind myself that it's not me. Feel me? I'm not that person. It's just a story that I created in my mind from abandonment, right? And rejection and the streets that I had to face when I was a child. So I get to choose today, right? I get to choose what I want to live. And I want to thank Frank, my man. I really appreciated your story, brother. Thank a whole lot for sharing with us, with me. And I'm gonna thank y'all, and y'all have a beautiful good night. Thank you.
Thanks, Gustavo.
Yes, thanks a lot. And I relate with a lot with what you're saying about um, the perceptions that we get to choose when we decide to find recovery. You know, you made a lot of good points. You know that life exists. You know, with the sun, the sky, nature, all those things are still there. You know, and it is interesting how one day I can fall asleep and be in a shit mood and wake up the next day and be like, hey, I'm in a good mood now, you know, like what is that that's really causing that change of perception, you know, like why does my brain do that? But coming in these rooms definitely allows me to be cognizant. You know, I wake up in a kind of an off kilter mood and be like, okay, I'm feeling kind of off. People have told me this, and you know, these kind of tactics work to kind of counter that. So again, coming to these rooms has so many benefits for so many reasons, for real. So thank you for that beautiful share, Gustavo. Who else wants to share some good insight with us? Anyone?
I'm Dennis Alcoholic.
Hey, Dennis.
Yeah, your story kind of like reminded me of my youth. It reminded me of my bad behaviors growing up. I made a lot of bad choices, but when you talked about the hash, when I was in high school, there was a lot of that around coming from Afghanistan. The soldiers in Germany were mailing it back to our town. And I did get caught when I was 16 in a stolen vehicle with 2 cases of beer and a bunch of wine. And, you know, that was my first thing with the law. And I didn't really respect it. And when you talked about you don't ever trust nobody over 30, that we were like that as well. But you know, one thing you shined on to me is that meeting makers make it. You know, you stuck around these rooms. You know, when I came into the doors of AA, I had to fake it till I made it. You know, I wasn't really sure I wanted what you guys had, and you know, I'll always remember one thing. My sponsor, you know, he made me do some homework. Yeah, after 2 years of sobriety, I was still shooting off my mouth the wrong way at these meetings. And he pulled me outside and he said, Dennis, I want you to go. This is your next homework assignment. You have to go to 30 meetings in 30 days and don't say a word. And I did. And I tell you, I learned so much in that 30 days. You know, one thing it made me do was realize how twisted and sick I was and the behaviors. And I can tell, Fred, that your behaviors have probably changed 180 since you're a young guy. But anyway, I'm glad you all showed up tonight, and you all have a wonderful night unless you've made other plans. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. It's always nice to hear from you, buddy. Anyone else got something they'd like to share with us tonight?
Sean, alcoholic addict.
Hey, Sean.
Hello. Thanks for the share, Frank. I get to see you in Polly's meetings a lot, and I got to know you, and you're always have a positive slant, even with some of the dark things that you've gone through with your mom's passing and such. It's still, you have a lot of dignity and never seem to be looking for I mean, you're sharing as we all do, but it doesn't seem like it was to get sympathy. It was more to just a level set about what your life, the challenges, and was a good example, and I've always looked forward, and you're very supportive to other people. And so it's good to hear your story, because you're not really one to brag or talk about, you know, the experiences of being like a big story. It was, so to hear you share that was really very meaningful. I was thinking back to, I think I shared with you Logan's Run, but that was a movie I remember way back when, where you got to live to 30, and then after that, you know, it was, your life was over. And I remember, I'm not, well, I was born in the 60s, so it was more of the 70s when I got into my drugging and using, but I always kind of wanted to adopt the 60s. I remember that. And for a while, I think I remember Timothy Leary or somebody had experimented with acid, and there was a theory that if you tripped 30 times that you would not be able to come back. It would be like your brain's fried, man. There's no coming back after 30 hits. So I kind of blew through that one, and I was a little worried that the spokes I'm missing in my wheel was due to that. But I remember depression long before all that using, and it was years of it, long before the pot and the hash and the downers and all that. There was depression. So when it's almost relevant what we had first or what it was that we're dealing with today, because it's just a lot we were given, but you're making the most of it. And I guess that is an example you're sharing here that I appreciate. And I hear from almost everybody that shares here some aspect of something positive they're getting from this experience, which, so you're making something positive out of something that could be considered a bad role, a bad, you know, lot, but I think it adds the character and gives you you're there for the people in those different groups, an advocate for so many groups that wouldn't have that voice if there wasn't somebody brave enough and positive enough to cross those boundaries. So anyways, I appreciated your share. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. And I think you bring up a good point about, you know, advocacy moving forward. You know, a lot of us do seem to relate with life traumas before the use started. And I think that there's some pretty strong correlations within those traumas and whatever they might be. And I think that it is important for the advocacy to kind of come through and kind of break up the stigmatism of what, or the stigmas of what addiction is, you know, or just stigmas in culture in general. Yeah, there's a lot of advocacy that has to happen, and a lot of it starts with internal self-dialect and acceptance of the scenarios and situations that we find ourselves in and have come through. When Frank was sharing his story, there was no doubt that he accepted who he was and his story. You know, and Frank continues to come to these meetings with his acceptance, you know, and he brings to the table. I remember being in the meetings with him in September, hearing him walk through the process of everything that came with having to, you know, put his mother to rest and all of the loose ends that came with that. And Frank was here telling us what he was doing and going through it. And it's admirable in so many ways. It takes a strong person to come into a group of people and tell them what's going on and trusting that they will be getting the love and support that they need to stay strong, you know, like yes, sobriety is a beautiful thing. And I hope that recovery gets a lot more light shined on it moving forward in the future than just not using drugs anymore, because it's a complete lifestyle change from the lives that we used to know. And I can speak for myself that it's some of the hardest work that I've ever had to do. You know, how does one learn to become a spiritual being? How does one learn how to be honest? How does one learn how to trust others and be vulnerable and brave and courageous, and all of these things that come from recovery, when the easiest thing for me to do in addiction is none of those things, you know? Like, there's a significant amount of effort that is involved, and for people to string together years of that hard work is so admirable. And it really is. And I know that there's several people in this room who have years of sobriety strung together, and they still go through ebbs and flows just like I do, you know, and this is why we ultimately come together in a community format. So good point on the advocacy, Sean. Led me down a tangent, so good job. Anybody else got something they'd like to share with us tonight? All right, everyone. Looks like we've come to the end of our meeting tonight. Thank you all for showing up here to support Frank, to learn for yourselves, to heal yourselves, support one another. I love these meetings. I love being able to come, you know, to have the opportunity to host them every week, not only for the speaker to tell me who I am more, but also just to watch you guys relate and grow with them as well. I think this is a beautiful place to be. These stories are very impactful and powerful. So thank you for that. And be sure to thank yourself as well for applying the effort to show up and be vulnerable. For all of those in this world who are suffering in any way, please take a moment of silence for them, and then we will close out with the Serenity Prayer if you would like to join in. God,
God,
grant us
humanity,
accept the things cannot change,
courage,
and the things I can,
and the wisdom to know the
the difference.
Keep
Just
coming
for
back.
today.
It works when you're working. Good job. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Travis. Have a good evening, you guys.
Great job hosting, Travis.
Thank you. Thank you. Be well, everyone.
Thanks for your share, Frank.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Travis.
Welcome.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Travis. Good job.
Thanks,
Take care,
Leah.
everybody. Take care, everybody.